Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We are diving deep today into a figure whose life presents one of the most, just compelling juxtapositions we have ever come across in the sources.
Absolutely.
We're looking at the professional life and the deeply serious private interests of Suzi Suzuki, a notable former Japanese-American adult film star.
And for you, the listener, our mission here is to sort of bypass the immediate, very visible, the commercial side of her.
Right.
The sources we've got stacked up here really challenge this idea that any public figure can be defined by just one thing. We're investigating this fascinating conflict between her screen image and her intense intellectual and cultural pursuits.
The initial hook here is it's breathtaking. On one hand, you have a performer known for films with, let's be honest, very blunt titles.
A remarkable title.
Exactly. Titles like Susie Bombhaleo and Butthole Whores. And then on the other side, you have the exact same person who is a trained jazz singer.
A published author, even.
A literary expert on Haruki Murakami, and a devoted practicing Navajo rug weaver. It's almost unbelievable.
It's the perfect example of how, sometimes the more intense a person's public career is, the more complex their private interests become. They're like these intellectual pressure valves.
That's a great way to put it. So let's establish the basics of her life and career, because that story alone is about ambition and constant movement.
Right.
She was born Katsura Hayama Plummer, May 3, 1972, in Tokyo. She also used stage names, Cherry Blossom or Christy, early on.
And her childhood wasn't just in Japan. The family moved around. She actually spent 4 years living in Germany before they returned to Tokyo.
But the key thing, and this comes up again and again, is that she had this serious artistic talent from a very young age.
A very young age. While she was still a teenager, she won an opportunity, a scholarship, to study jazz.
In New York City.
In New York City, which of course changes everything.
That scholarship is what brings her to Manhattan, and that's where this really unexpected career turn begins. She was working part-time, trying to support herself at a karaoke bar.
As you do.
And she spots a newspaper ad. It's looking for figure models.
And the sources say her English wasn't perfect at the time, so she was, by all accounts, genuinely shocked when she found out what it actually entailed.
So she didn't quite know what she was walking into.
Not fully. But instead of running away, she seems to have approached it with this sort of pragmatic curiosity. And that led pretty quickly to nude modeling. And then, in 1994, she breaks into the hardcore industry.
Recruited by some pretty big names at the time, right? Ed Powers, Jamie Gillis.
The big guns of that era, yeah.
That feels like a massive leap, though. From a karaoke bar and jazz lessons to that. Do the sources give us any insight into the why? Was it just money or was it something else?
It seems like a mix of both. It was opportunistic, for sure, but also driven by this curiosity. And she found a niche where she could really, really excel.
What was the niche?
Her authenticity. In the mid-90s American market, she was reportedly the only genuine Japanese woman performing in American hardcore.
Wait, really? The only one?
The only one. There were others who, claimed some Asian heritage or just used a Japanese-sounding name, but she was the real deal.
So her authenticity became her brand, her key differentiator.
Exactly. And she clearly understood the business side of it. She was a total professional.
Right. This wasn't just about the videos.
Not at all. She was building an empire. She supplemented her income with merchandise, website memberships, and she worked constantly as a stripper and exotic dancer.
And she was touring everywhere.
Everywhere. The U.S., Canada, Greece, back to Tokyo. She was always on the move, always promoting.
Which makes the end of her career all the more interesting. She didn't just fade away. She had a plan.
A very clear plan. She shuts down her website, retires completely in 2004.
And the reason she gives is it's pure professionalism.
It really is. She said that 7 years earlier, she'd made a promise to herself that she would only stay in the business for 5 years.
So she was 2 years late, by her own metric.
Right. She basically says, okay, 7 years is a perfectly respectable run. Time to hold myself accountable to that promise. She saw it as a project with a clear end date.
Which is so rare in that industry, to actually have an exit strategy and stick to it. And the epilogue to her career is just as startling. Since retiring, she's reported to have become a real estate agent.
In Las Vegas, for GMA Real Estate.
From adult film star to Las Vegas realtor.
But it makes a certain kind of sense, right?
Yeah.
She moved from one highly transactional, detail-oriented self-marketing profession to another. She just applied that same discipline to a totally different field.
Which is the perfect bridge to the other side of her life. The part of this deep dive where we have to pivot completely. from professional discipline to intellectual discipline. Here's where it gets really interesting.
It really is.
Let's talk about the incredibly sophisticated private life she was cultivating this whole time.
It's astonishing. I mean, how compartmentalized her mind must have been. We know she studied modern literature, and this wasn't, just casual reading.
No. The sources confirm she had read every single novel by the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami.
Every single one.
Reading every book by a writer like Murakami, I mean, his novels are complex, they're long, they're surreal. That is not a hobby. That is an academic project.
It implies a serious intellectual stamina, a deep interest in complex narratives in psychology, which is such a stark contrast to the very direct content of her film work.
And she had real connections in that world, too.
She did. She went to college with the famous author Banana Yoshimoto.
So this was her peer group, in a way. And then let's go back to her first love, music. She wasn't just singing in a karaoke bar.
No, she was a trained jazz vocalist. She released 3 albums.
One of them called Searching for Louis.
Right, and her commitment was so deep, her little dog, a Bichon Frise, was named Louis in honor of Louis Armstrong.
I love that detail.
Her musical style was apparently this unique kind of cabaret. The sources describe it as Marlene Dietrich meets a sort of subdued Yoko Ono.
That is a very specific vibe.
And what's fascinating is she tried to bridge her 2 worlds. She'd sometimes sing for a few minutes at the beginning of her striptease performances.
A little moment of art before the commerce?
Exactly. A way of holding on to that part of herself.
That's beautiful, but if literature and jazz were serious hobbies, her dedication to Native American culture, specifically Navajo weaving, that sounds like something else entirely, a spiritual commitment.
This is the centerpiece. This is what defines her depth. There's this story from a writer, Peter Davis, who asked her on a date.
Okay.
And he suggests the classic, fancy Boulder date. A limo, dinner at the super high-end Flagstaff house.
And she says?
She politely turns it all down. The whole spectacle.
Okay, so what was her counteroffer?
Her counterproposal was that they pursue a very serious project. Her words.
A serious project on a first date? I'm intrigued.
And that project was exploring Navajo and Native American culture, specifically learning about weaving rugs. She wanted the date to be about shared intellectual discovery.
Wow. And this wasn't a new interest for her.
Not at all. This was already a deep, fully formed passion. She tells him she had already lived on a reservation in a traditional hogan for a whole week.
Lived there?
Lived there to learn weaving directly from a Navajo woman. She does her own spinning, her own weaving from sheep. She even beads bags. This is a hands-on, deep commitment.
That level of physical commitment, living there, working with the raw materials, that goes so far beyond a celebrity hobby. It's about true mastery and respect for a craft.
It is. So the date ends up being a 3-hour research trip to a place called Charlie Eagle Plume's Trading Post. And she apparently just blew everyone away with her knowledge.
She knew her stuff.
She knew her stuff. She could tell you the difference between specific, complex weaving styles. Like, she knew the 2 Gray Hills style versus the incredibly detailed Tiknos Pas style.
Yeah.
She knew about native dyes, where they came from.
So she's not a tourist. She's a scholar of this art form.
A true practitioner.
Yeah.
And she bought 2 weavings that day and a beaded bracelet depicting the Shiprock area in New Mexico. This was serious study.
The common thread here, across the books, the music, the weaving, it's this absolute dedication to detail, to mastery.
That's what defines her private life, that intense focus.
So let's bring that intelligence back into the world where she made her living. She clearly had a very sharp, maybe even dark sense of humor.
Mm-hmm.
There's the joke about her late father, who was an engineer for Hitachi.
Right, the electronics giant.
She joked that he might have secretly designed vibrators, though his actual skills were for much larger projects.
It's a great line. And that humor connects directly to her own technical expertise. The source described her as having an encyclopedic knowledge of sex toys.
This wasn't just for show. This was a deep, mechanical understanding of pleasure.
She was a true expert in the tools of her trade. She visits a sex store, Fascinations, and immediately points out they don't carry the specific S-shaped crystal wand she prefers.
Which she had, of course, packed herself.
Of course. And she shows the writer this little battery-powered mini vibrator that's meant to be attached to your tongue. She was just scientifically curious about sensation.
And this analytical approach, it extended directly to performance, to intimacy. This is where her professional detachment is just crystal clear.
She viewed it all through a lens of technique,
of
physical mechanics. She's giving the writer, anatomical feedback on his performance.
I can't even imagine. The source says she told him his specific angle was, and I'm quoting, better for doggy or scissor style than for the missionary position.
I mean, that is the ultimate application of professional intelligence,
Yeah.
right? Treating a physical connection like a technical problem that you can optimize.
Exactly. And her analytical mind was always working. Even during a scene at an SM club, she was analyzing how pain can turn into pleasure.
Right. She was nervous about it, but she was watching the performer's technique, noting how he knew exactly how to manage the sensation, the interaction.
She was also clearly an enthusiast. She wanted to share her knowledge and encourage new experiences.
Very much so. She asks the writer if he'd ever tried a specific act, and when he says no, she immediately pulls out a latex glove and some lubricant.
And just teaches him.
Right there and then. She introduces him to the sensation of being finger-fucked in the ass, and he describes his reaction as just shaking and shouting.
He was a guide, in a way. Accommodating, skillful, focused on expanding his sensory world.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? When you put all these pieces together, the performer, the intellectual, the craftsperson,
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
the takeaway for me is this profound unity hiding inside the contradictions. The same analytical mind that could master the specs of a crystal wand
and the kinetics of intimacy.
was the same mind she applied to mastering the warp and weft of a Tiknos rug. It's the same intelligence, just pointed in different directions.
It really highlights how these highly visible, specialized careers, especially in performance or sales, they often mask this deep, reflective inner life. Her sophistication wasn't limited by her job. It flowed wherever her curiosity took her.
Exactly. The story of Suzi Suzuki is this profound reminder that you just cannot define a person's intellectual or spiritual depth by their most marketable skill.
And this brings us to the final thought for you to consider long after this deep dive is over. How much of a person's real identity is defined by their most public, most profitable activity, the videos, the real estate, versus the serious non-monetized work they do just for the love of it?
That's the real question.
What deep, quiet intellectual projects, whether it's mastering a craft or deep literary study or a complex art form, what projects might the people all around you be pursuing right now that you know absolutely nothing about? And what might that tell you about who they really are?